fellow adventurers. Welcome to Artistic Adventures. This is part 4 of our Vampire Slayer project, and we're doing more weapons today. We're going to make a sword and a wooden stake holder for our wooden stakes and a few other things. So let's get started. First of all, I'm going to show you how I made these wooden stakes that we're going to use to plunge into the vampire's hearts. I just took a dowel this size and I started carving off the end into a point. And I kept it long until I had the point carved because it's easier to hold on to and carve it and turn it. And once I get the point where I want it, then I measure it to make sure I get it the same length as the others and use an X-Acto to cut through and pop off the end. Then I'm going to take a little bit of sandpaper and sand the ends just to make them smooth from where I broke them off of the big piece. And we'll do that to all of them real quickly in fast forward. So now we have our wooden stakes. So I want to have something for her to wear around her neck, and I decided to do a bandolier and put this across her chest to put the stakes in so they're handy to reach when she needs to stab someone. However, I'm not going to be able to put them between her breasts, so what I'm going to do is do two areas. And I'm using the same fake leather that I used for her bustier. And once I made my pattern out of paper towel, I folded it so I can make use of the fold of the material to be at the top of the shoulder. And then I cut out the diagonal piece. And at the very top of the shoulder is going to come to a point. It's going to look like that so that it comes out over her shoulder in a point. And I have something to put on that a little bit later in the video I'll show you. All right, so that's going to be the main part of the bandolier. Now you see these a lot with bullets in them on soldiers, but we're going to use them for wooden stakes. So I measure that across, and it's going to come just down to her hip in both the front and the back, and then we'll be attaching the wooden stakes to the front part. So I'm going to do 3 up at the top and 2 a little bit lower since I can't really work between her mountainous breast very well. All right, so I'm going to measure out where I want these to be, and I'm using some little mini bob pins to help me hold this little black trim down. It's like fake leather trim. And I glue a little piece at the top to start out with and put one of the bob pins on to secure it. Then I put one of the stakes next to that and fold that black trim over it in a loop, and then put another little dab of glue on the other side of the stake. And then I'm going to put another bob pin to hold that down once I make sure it's secure. And then I'm just going to continue this process for the next 2 stakes, and then I'll leave it to dry so that they're nice and secure. So same thing, just on either side of the stake, putting a little dab of glue, and then using my little mini bob pins to clamp it down. This will make sure that we get a good secure glue. And once I get that done, then I can trim off that end of the leather since I don't need that anymore. And I'll probably use that for the bottom part where I'm going to put 2 more of these stakes. You can never have too many stakes, really. I mean, just think about it. You never know when you're going to run into a whole hive of vampires, right? So here we go. I'm going to measure here and see. I'm going to start about right there and put 2 more. So I'm doing the same thing, starting out with a little dab of glue to put the first piece of that leather strip on, and then measuring my areas between the stakes to put more glue and putting the bob pins to secure it down, and then trim off that final end piece. So that's going to be the stake holder bandolier, and we'll finish more on that later. But now let's work on the sword. This will be sort of like that TV show Forged, but without all the fire and pounding. We're going to, I looked at some of the swords that I had on hand. These are actually for a 1/6 size doll, and we're working on a 1/3 size doll because they're just too little for me to make use of. But I am sort of looking at them as the design. But I will use this little dagger, I think, for her boot. I think it'll be enough of a size that it won't make a difference. So now I'm going to draw out the pattern that I want my blade to look like on a piece of card note card, and I'm using my ruler there just to get a straight line and coming down into a point. And you can see how much bigger this blade's going to be than the 1/6 size. 1/6 would be good for Monster High or Barbie, but not for this 1/3 BJD. All right, and then I'm taping another piece of cardstock to the top so I can draw out my handle, because I am going to have the metal as a brace for the polymer clay that I'm going to put on top of it, but it'll just help it keep its shape and give it some strength. So now I'm just going to sketch out how I want the handle to look. And basically it's going to be like a cross, because you know, you can always use the sword end as a cross if you run out of crosses to give to the vampire. So this is a little bit smaller than the handle's actually going to be, because it's going to be inside some polymer clay, but that's just for bracing it or making it strong. Now put this down, and I'm using a permanent marker to go around and mark all the edges of this so I can cut it out. And to cut it out, I'm using a pair of kitchen shears, which it's a little bit tough, but I was able to do it. I have some problems still with my right hand with that same thumb issue that I had on the left. So it's okay though. I was able to get it done, and you should be able to do it if you use kitchen shears. This is aluminum sheet that we got at Lowe's if you're looking for where to get this. All right, so after I cut out everything, it really curls up as you cut it, and it makes some really sharp points. So be careful if you're doing this. It can really poke you and cause you to lose some blood. So now I'm just taking a couple of pliers that I have for straightening and flattening metal. They're just basically flat blades on them, and I'm just pressing that down and using my hand also to bend and make the sword straight and the edges straight. And once I get it straight like I need it to be, then we can start sharpening the edge. And I'm using a file that I had from my old jewelry making days, when I used to actually cast metal jewelry, and I enjoyed that for a while, and then I moved on to something else. And I'm moving the file down the edge at a pretty sharp angle, not straight up and down, because I want to get this polished to look like it's got a sharp edge on it. So I'm using the file to help create that look. And I'm also filing off some of those sharp pointed edges on the handle so I don't keep poking myself. So you can kind of see how I'm adding that edge, and it gives a little bit of reflection when you move it into the light, so you can see it looks like it's been sharpened, actually sharpened. So I'm going to use some Primo polymer clay, and I'm just using white because I'm going to paint it, and I'm running it through my pasta maker to soften it and also to get it flat. That's off camera. Once I get it nice and flat, then I'm going to lay the sword handle down and cut around the edges. And I'm going to make two of these, one to go on each side of the handle. And once I get this one cut out, then I'll lay the other one right on top of it. And then I can start molding the handle piece the way I want it to look. So I want the piece closest to the blade to be basically just straight and flat. The handle I want to be a little bit narrower at the very top and at the bottom, so that the middle part is a little bit fatter and easier to grip. And now I'm making two small balls, trying to get them the same size, rolling them out, and they'll be on either end of the pommel, and then the bigger one will be at the end of the handle. So once you get that nice and shaped out, we can attach those. And I'm using the table. I have a glass top table, which is awesome for crafts. And I can use that just to press this down on to make it flat. And then once you get it where you want it, you can just press that on there. And you've got your little ball into those pieces as well as the handle. Now to make sure they stay, because I'm not really working them into the clay, I'm going to use some liquid Sculpey and just put a drop of that on either side of the seam where the ball meets the handle, and that will make sure that those balls stay on and don't come off after it's baked. So we're going to put that in the oven, in the forge of the toaster oven, and let that cook for 30 minutes. And meanwhile, we'll be working on a sheath for our sword. So I'm using that same fake leather material, and I'm drawing out about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the sword, so I have room to glue it and for the sword to still slide in. And then I'm marking where the top of the sword will come so I can cut off a strip that will attach to her belt, because it's a little bit longer than the sword actually is. All right, I'm using some E6000 with my sharp tool. I'm just putting that on the very, very edge of one side of the sheath, and then I will press the top down on it, and then after that's dried a little bit, I can glue the other side. This just makes it easier to glue the other side without worrying about it coming loose. So after I've done that, you can see this is where I'm going to cut it at the part where the sword is going to end and make a little strap that will go on the belt. We'll come back and work with that more later. So now that I've got that one side dry, I can go back and use my glue to glue the other side. And I'm just going to use the tip of the glue applicator here to put just a very thin piece on the very edge of this fabric. I wish this was a little stiffer. That's the only thing I regret. I wish the fabric was a little stiffer. Maybe it would have been if I'd used real leather, but I didn't want to. So anyway, now we're going to make a little sheath for that dagger I showed you, and we're cutting about uh, a piece about twice as width of the blade so we can glue it. Now for this, I decided to use that E6000 fabric fuse. It takes a little longer to dry, but it's just a more precise way. And also, I'm running out of E6000. Can you believe it? I had a whole lot of those little tubes, and I've run through them fairly quickly here with all these projects. So I'm waiting for the mailman to come, and hopefully he will bring me my new shipment. But right now, I'm going to use this product for the little sheath. Okay, and I'm going back to that bigger sword sheath and cutting off one of those straps because I only need that on one side. We'll have to have the other side open to put the sword in. Then I'm just going to glue some strips of that material across the top just to give it a little more substantial look. And they're a little longer than they need to be, but we can trim those off later. I'm just going to make sure they get glued for now. Yeah, we can trim that off a little later. Now I'm taking the little small sheath, and I'm going to put some strips of that fabric across the top of it, and then I'm going to attach that long strand of leather trim to it. So I'm putting those two little pieces across the top of that just to give it a little more depth and detail. And then I'm putting a little dab of glue on the back of it, and I'm going to glue this leather trim strap down to it. And that's how we're going to attach it to the boot. We're just going to wrap it around and tie it. I think that would look kind of cool. All right, so I think our bandolier is dry by now, and we're going to take off those bob pins. And it looks like everything's holding really well. So that part is finished. And now what we can do is drape it over her and then glue it down on the side where it's going to cross over. So let's bring it around, and it's going to cross over there just at her waist, or maybe just a little below. And I'm leaving the crossed over pieces because I think they look kind of cool like that. And then just put a dab of glue between the two, and I'm going to hold that down for a second or two and let that dry. And now I'm going to take a little strip of that same material, make a loop. This is going to be what our strap will go through. So you see there's a little hole in it. Whoop. Yeah, so that is where the strap of the sword will go through. the sword sheath. So I'm just going to glue that down right over where I crossed those two pieces over. And it doesn't take long with the E6000. All right, now the sword is out of the oven, and I'm going to take some 220 grit sandpaper and smooth it up. Right, it's almost perfect, but it does have a few little blemishes that I want to make smooth because I am going to paint it with some silver paint so it'll look like metal. So once I get it completely smooth the way I want it, then I'm just going to take some, this is actually Martha Stewart acrylic silver metallic paint. There's other brands that are just as good. You don't have to use Martha Stewart. That's just what I found that day. All right, now I'm just going to paint. I actually put 3 coats of it on, but I'm only going to do one on camera to save time, and then we'll let that dry while we work on some other things. I'm going to cover the handle part with some leather strip, but I'm still going to paint it because parts of it might show through. Well, the ends will. All right, so there's our handle with the first coat. So we're going to let that dry. And now what we're going to do is attach the dagger to the boot. It has this little dangly thing on the buckle. I don't really like it anyway because it really doesn't do anything. So we're going to take our little knife and stick it in the sheath. All right. And then just wrap that strap around and tie it in the front. And now we've got that extra weapon down on the boot that she can pull out when needed. It also kind of looks like a cross too, so crosses everywhere. Now that part's complete. We are going to actually make her a cross necklace. I found this sort of Byzantine looking silver cross that I wanted to use. So I took a length of silver chain and cut it the right size, slipped the silver cross charm on there, and now I'm going to add finding to the end. It's kind of a neat finding. It's like a little snap. So I'm just using jump rings to attach the ends. And there we have our cross necklace. You got to have that to be a vampire slayer. And now I'm just going to put it around her neck and attach it. And you'll get a better look at it a little bit later when I show you the final details. It's not very long, but I wanted it to hang down above where her bustier starts. All right, so now I'm putting some little detail on our sword. I'm putting a little ruby crystal. I thought that was appropriate. You can see now with the 3 coats of paint, it looks a lot more like metal. So that part is done. I'm going to let that dry. Now I took a little metal tool. It's a carving tool that I have, and with a ruler, I just ran that up and down the middle. A lot of swords like this you'll see have a groove down the center. And I couldn't make very deep groove, but I can use a Sharpie to make it look a little bit bigger and deeper. So I'm just using a Sharpie because it's permanent. All right, so we've got our 2 lines on either side of the sword, and that's pretty much it for the sword. Oh, I've got to put the handle on. I'll show you that in a minute. All right. Oh, see how easy it is to find those scissors when they're on a string? Yeah, that's helping me a lot. Now I'm just trimming up any glue that's squished out of that sheath and also making sure that the sword fits in it. And it actually fits. Yay! So there's our sword sheath. We still have to attach it to the bandolier. And we'll go ahead and do that right now. So I'm cutting a little point on the end of that strip, and then we're going to thread that through that little loop that we made. Once we get that through, then we'll be able to glue it down. So I'm going to put a little glue on that pointed tip and then just bend it over and glue it. I like that it's pointed because it shows, and it just is a little added touch to make it look decorative. So I'm down to this much E6000 glue, and I'm panicking. But I think all I have left is just 2 little dots on this sword to hold this strip down. So I hope I'll make it. So I'm going to put one little dab there, and then we're just going to wrap that around the sword hilt, overlapping. And then when we get to the end, I'll need one more little dab of glue. Yay, I think I'm making it. And then we'll just fold that over and let that dry. And then that is the end of what we're going to do to this sword today. So there it is with the handle wrapped. I'm so excited. I love the sword. I'm going to put a little decorative touch on the shoulder piece of the bandolier. This is just a bronze finding that I had from jewelry making. I'm just going to clip off those loops that would have been used to attach it to string or wire or whatever on a necklace. And then put some glue on it and glue it to the top. Now that'll be right at the shoulder. The point will come out over the top of her shoulder. I just kind of like those little decorative touches. All right, so we've got our sheath here, and we're going to finally trim off those ends at the top of the sword sheath that I said we'd trim. And now we can put our sword in. I just think it looks so cool. I have to make up a story about the jewel on it, where that came from. All right, so it fits, everything looks good. So let's take a look at everything we've done in this video a little closer. All right, there's the sword with the jewel and the wrapped hilt. There's even more decorative things you could do to that if you wanted. And there's the bandolier with the wooden stakes in it and the sword attached. And there's a look at how the necklace looks on the doll once it's all finished. And here's a closer look at the bandolier and the sword on the doll standing up. A little bit closer look at the sword. And then there's the dagger on the boot. So that's about it for this video. You can see here the final look, but we still have more to do for this doll. We're going to be making a coat next and doing some final touches. I hope you liked this. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And also, as always, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Okay, thanks and bye.